What's up, Roots and Fruits community? Today, I'm here to tell all in this unfiltered episode of our mold story. It's really still unfolding, but we have a lot under our belt that I want to share and be vulnerable and bring some attention to this uber important conversation in the health sphere that does not get enough airtime. Before I dig into it, there's two things I want to say. Number one, what are the freaking chances that right now I'm sitting in a moldy hotel room? And all of that to say, this is where I have set up shop to record and I have to just get her done. So I'm staying, but I open the windows because otherwise I cannot stay here. And you might hear cars and birds and whatever else is outside the window. So that is a little disclosure. And then the second thing I want to say is a huge thank you to Microbalance Health Products for sponsoring this 4-part mini-series. This is the first of 4 episodes that are going to dive deep into mold. We're starting with my story to kind of frame where this is coming from, give you some context, but also hear a personal story of how mold can truly impact your health. Then we're going to speak with 3 different experts that are in both the health side, body side of mold stuff and the house side of mold stuff. And I think that in those episodes, you are going to learn so very much. So today, I hope that you mostly just feel inspired and empowered by our story to start asking questions about how mold might be affecting you and your family in your life. And then it will be followed up by 3 episodes that we'll be releasing over the summer while I'm having a baby. And I really am just excited for this. Like, the conversations we've recorded so far are truly amazing. And as I'll get to in our story, I feel like this whole journey that we've been on as a family will somehow mark my comeback after baby professionally. I don't know how. I don't know if I'm going to niche down or specialize in this, or if it'll just be a really big passion of mine, but that's on my radar. So without further ado, here's our story. My family recently lost our home, our health, and most of our belongings to mold. What started off as vague, mysterious symptoms and suspicions became a full-blown health and home crisis. It shook us. Living in a trailer for 4 months while pregnant and with a toddler has not been easy, but one thing that's come of it is a lot of research down the deep, dark rabbit hole of mold. I've partnered with Microbalance Health to bring you a 4-part mold mini-series to educate, inspire, and hopefully empower you to take good steps in your life against mycotoxins and their toxic, detrimental effects on human health. This is our story. These are the experts we trust. This is the Roots and Fruits podcast, The Mold Files. Our mold journey really starts years ago. Years and years and years ago, really. My husband has asthma and allergies and things that we are taught to believe are just normal parts of life that you're born with. And, some people are lucky and some people aren't. Throughout my experience in the natural health world, particularly getting training both in school, in my own research, and working in a health food store that had an incredible owner and nutritional consultant who really was passionate about some of these topics and helped many people through them, my eyes were open to the fact that it's not coincidence. Maybe genetics are a factor. However, it's not a coincidence that people suffer with respiratory things. There's always some reason that has triggered these issues. As my husband and I's lives came together, I began to challenge some of those things and wonder and try and connect some dots for him in his life and help him heal. And obviously, he's not 100% free of asthma and allergies, but he has noticed a significant decrease in symptoms by both cleaning up his diet and improving his gut health, but then more recently, I guess, considering air quality and how that's been a part of his story probably throughout his whole life to some degree. And so I say that our story really starts back in my husband's childhood. For me, I've wondered too, it's interesting, once you learn something and it becomes a little bit a part of your worldview, it's hard to unsee that. And so then you start to look back at your life prior to having that worldview and looking at it through that lens and being like, wait a minute, this is a different color now, that part of my story. So I do wonder, especially in my young adult years, different buildings I lived in, renting situations, I do wonder about mold. However, fast forward a bunch of years, we get married, we buy our first house. I would say it didn't really have a mold problem. However, I believe that some of the things I was smelling and starting to become nervous about mold were actually from a rental that my husband was in prior to being married. I'm 100% convinced that it was mold infested based on the smell, based on his symptoms. In that period of living in that time, he did not sleep well. And that carried into him moving into our new home together, where he, for a few months, he could not sleep well. And by well, I mean, like, he could not fall asleep. He was up multiple times and there was no like rhyme or reason for him because he'd never been that bad of a sleeper. So I'm convinced that the place he lived in before we moved together, was very moldy. And I think that as we brought our lives together, a lot of his belongings were moldy. And I didn't know what I know now about, what to toss, what to keep, what to sanitize, how to sanitize. And so a lot of those belongings just came into our home. And I do believe that did bring some mold into our house. And then we also, being the people that we are, removed the microwave with intentions of putting in a hood fan over the stove. But it kind of was one of those house projects that we like half did and didn't finish. And then finances were tight and we never did it. And so in that year period of like not having a microwave, not having a hood fan, not having even a recirculating fan without the microwave, there was a lot of condensation in the kitchen. And it wasn't until we decided to sell that house and I was deep cleaning everything that I got on top of the cupboards and found that there was just like a layer of mold. And I was like, I'm so grossed out because I kept having this hunch that there was mold somewhere in the house. We didn't have any crazy symptoms or anything, but just the smells I was smelling. So that was really validating. But also it was like, well, we're leaving and we're moving, so it'll be okay. Now, the reason we moved, to be completely candid and transparent, was financial. We had been really struggling financially since starting business, especially trying to do e-commerce. And it's something that I would love to restart, but there were mistakes made. And that's okay because now I learned. And if we ever restart, it will be a lot different. But there were some mistakes made that really bit us in the butt financially, and we were just strapped. And then if you go back and listen to our birth story with our first son, there was some financial hardship after that as well, due honestly to the time off work, but also the amount of formula and the quality of formula that we were not willing to compromise on. And so anyways, we had all this debt. We were living paycheck to paycheck and we were trying to refinance our mortgage, and our incredible mortgage broker, if you are in the area or if you're in Canada, she can work with you virtually. Marley Shimoda, Mortgages with Marley, look her up, book on in. She was like, you can refinance these. This is what the numbers look like. Or if you sold and bought something else, you could buy something at a higher value and pay off pretty much all your debt. So to us, it was a no-brainer. Option 1, we didn't pay off all our debt. Option 2, we paid off all our debt and got to like upgrade our house. So we were like, okay, we weren't really like wanting to move or thinking that we needed to move space-wise. We really loved our first home. We poured our hearts into the backyard and the inside, and we had dreams for the front yard, and we loved the location. But we were like, this financial bondage was not worth it for us. So we decided to do that. We would sell, we would pay off all our debt, business and personal. We would have money left over to put into the new house, which was, to me, the linchpin for buying this house because it was very old and I suspected mold. in the process of looking at homes, I was very mold aware. I would say, I think 75% of the houses that we looked at were obviously blatantly moldy. And I don't know, I just developed a super sniffer, I guess, for mold. Other people don't seem to care, but they also maybe don't have the same symptoms in a space. So in some ways, it's really a gift to have that, because you don't have to then test every single space you're in. I can walk in and know, for example, this hotel room, for sure moldy. Now, I'm kicking myself today because I booked a hotel room to get a whole bunch of work done to finish off everything before maternity leave. And I didn't think and use my brain about the fact that this hotel has a pool smack in the middle of the hotel, and it's not enclosed in any sort of like humid pool room. So that humidity is just all over this hotel, and this whole hotel reeks. So we'll see if I sleep tonight or if I end up just leaving. But anyways, all of that to say is that super sniffer gift came in handy when house shopping. And then in the house that we ended up buying, I did have a hunch that it was not clean. However, we requested, I believe it was a second showing, or, I think we maybe put a conditional offer on mold testing or something. Forget how it all worked out. So I went with the realtor and I used the microbalance test plates. If you're curious whether or not you have mold in your home, skip the $2,000 air quality test that isn't all that accurate and jump right to Microbalance Health's test plates. All you do is open them up, leave them in a room for 1 hour, seal them, wrap them, and let them sit for 5 days. Then you're going to know if you have a problem, where the problem is, and how bad the problem is. Use my code Roots and Fruits at checkout on Microbalance Health's website, linked in the show notes, for 10% off your purchase. So the test plates only have to be sitting out for 1 hour. Then you close them, seal them, wrap them, and store them away for 5 days. And so I was like, you know what? This is like, to our local health food store, $50 Canadian with tax, versus like, I'm not gonna put a condition on a house and spend $2,000 on like air quality testing, which I know has some flaws, which we'll get into throughout the next few episodes. It was a low cost, easy way to know, is this house even safe? Like, is there a huge problem or not? So one thing that we knew for sure was there was asbestos, given the age of the home and the type of flooring. So we'd budgeted to get that removed and like dealt with and gone. We figured that because it's an old house, there has to be mold somewhere. So we were kind of like expecting that if we buy it, we are going to be dealing with mold to some capacity. But we thought we'd use the test plates to be like, is the problem really bad where we should not even buy this house? Or is it just a minor problem that we could fix with, thousands of dollars and a remediation crew? The test plates came back as there was mold, but it wasn't like off the charts. And so we thought that it should be okay. We still wanted to do air quality testing because that's what we had available to us in our area in the traditional sense. I asked a lot of questions. I didn't really know what I was talking about, but I was skeptical. And it's what I imagine people feel when they start to be awakened to like the realm of whole person health and how there are some flaws in our medical system. And we can't just blindly trust every single doctor and what they say when they don't ask us how we eat or sleep or live our life. And that's how I felt in the mold sphere, where I'm like, I'm starting to question how some of this is done, but I don't have enough knowledge or background to be like saying no. This is what we had available to us. So we did the air quality testing. I believe only the basement was tested because that's where most of our concerns were. That's where it smelled. That's where there was some visibly funky things. It was unfinished. It was gross. The previous owner had animals that defecated down there, blah, blah, blah. And so they did air quality testing. And now the way air quality testing works, and I am not an expert, but I have learned a little bit, is that they sample the outside air, they sample the inside air, and then they compare it. And if the inside air is comparable to the outside air, maybe slightly elevated, but not too bad, then you're fine. There's a lot of problems with that scenario. First of all, because mold outside is very natural and normal. It's part of how the ecosystem works. Mold inside, different issue. Now, every building's going to have some degree of mold. You leave bananas on the counter too long, they might get moldy. You forget your bread, it might get moldy, right? However, we want to make sure that it never gets to a point of like being a hidden invisible problem that's going to affect your health. And ideally, you want that number to be as close to 0 as possible. So some of ours were like in that 200s or 300s, but because the outside air, which was taken very close to the house. So if you think about the house, the windows might be open, some of that stuff's coming in and out. Is it really truly like we should be taking it from like, I don't know, the middle of the forest or by an ocean where the air quality is clean, not in a gross yard that you can smell the house before you even walk in it, you know? Anyways, all of that to say, we were told that there was mold, but it wasn't a terrible amount. And there was a few spots that were visibly located that were communicated by the inspector to the remediation company to deal with, to remove, and or to seal with something like Kills, which is not a great solution. However, the more I asked questions, the more I was like, okay, maybe these people know what they're doing. And I'm sure they do. They're doing what they were taught, right? But just like how in the medical world, it's like nurses and doctors do what they're taught. They aren't taught the full scope of what health looks like. They're taught medicine in a modern way. Nothing wrong with that, right? But in the same way, these remediation companies are taught a very limited, narrow view of things. And so the idea of like air scrubbing, for example, there's some controversy. The idea of sealing something with Kills, there's a lot of controversy. And if you think about it logically, that's a Band-Aid fix. So if you're here and you're listening and you follow Roots and Fruits and you're interested in going deeper, you already know that slapping some chemical on something to just kill something off without actually dealing with the root problem is probably not a great idea. And so we had the remediation company in. We had some issues with them. Mostly there was some staffing changes and people moving. And so our case kind of got lost in the mix of like staffing transitions, and there was a lot of miscommunication that happened. And so we went back and forth with them for a couple of months, to be honest. And in that meantime, a couple of days, I think it was actually possession day, if I'm not mistaken, we knew that we wanted to move in after the remediation was done. So they had started the basement on possession day. We also had gotten in there on possession day to take out the shower upstairs, only one bathroom, and put in a bathtub because we're a family. I love baths. We're going to have babies. It's not realistic to not have a bathtub. And as we removed the shower, the whole entire washroom wall was covered in mold. Some people don't freak out about that. But for me, that was actually like an air sucking moment out of my lungs of like all of my worst fears coming true. And no air quality sample was even done upstairs. Now, the idea of air quality samples being inaccurate or not the full picture is something we'll get into later in the episode. But even if there had been an air quality sample upstairs, I would hope that it would have been, it would have shown up to some degree. I did not do test plates in every single room, by the way, so I didn't know that there was going to be that much mold in the bathroom. So that was interesting, and that took a lot more money than we had budgeted. So by the time we fully renovated the bathroom, which turned into like a semi-reno to a full gut, we completely got rid of everything, the sink, the toilet, even though there was no mold. It was just like, I know enough to know that spores are in the things that are surrounding the source. They did a full remediation in the bathroom. They did rip out as much as possible, and then they painted the entire thing in Kills as prevention or whatever. We insulated it. It was not insulated before. And then obviously as we reinstalled tub shower, put the proper materials behind it, which was not there when whoever put that shower in did a really bad job. A lot of mold stuff is common sense. Like, you probably shouldn't slap a shower where water is going to be leaking every day and around humid environment onto just straight up drywall. Not a good idea. And the way mold works is it seeps into the layers of the building materials. And so slapping kills on it is not enough. You want to try and remove as much of the material. Again, we'll get into that in later episodes. So the bathroom reno took a solid 2 months, which was rough. We got rid of our washer dryer downstairs that came with the house. Despite it being only a year old with no visible mold, with the amount of mold that actually was in the basement, I did not want to risk that. So we got rid of that. We bought a new one, and we didn't bring the new one in until the basement was like sealed and finished remediation, painted. Yeah. And so we brought that in. So basically since last November until now, recently, we haven't really had we had a laundry machine in the house for a month before we fled the house, a brand new one. But yeah, it's basically since we moved to that house, we've been in fight or flight. We've been in pure chaos because we've been in renos the whole time we were there. We just finished them, and then we realized that this house was affecting us so much. So to get to that part now, about a week into moving into this new house, I had a positive pregnancy test, which was super exciting and wonderful. I also, in that first week of pregnancy, had a dream that was very, very profound, and that has carried me through this absolutely insane pregnancy. I had a dream that it was like this big circular building with many circular rooms, kind of like those like Russian doll toy things that are within. And in the innermost room, I didn't see the baby, but I knew that there was a baby. And there was a woman who was standing outside the door. And there was no speaking in the dream. I just knew that that woman was protecting my baby. Very cool. Had a friend be like, I think that was Mother Mary. I'm like, you could be right. I don't know. But I know that dream, I used to dream pretty much every night and actually journal all my dreams out and pray and ask God what it meant, and sometimes have prophetic words for people, and sometimes it give me direction for my life and help me make decisions. And then I had a child. Then my sleep has changed, and I very rarely have such significant dreams. And when I do, I very rarely have the capacity, time, space, mental energy to write it down and sit there and pray about it. But that one was super profound. And I told my husband, and we talked about it. He's like, I think that means that this baby is going to be protected. I'm like, great. That's awesome. And I think that after miscarrying, after loss, it was something that really ministered to my heart. But I didn't know yet how important that dream would be for this season because I didn't know yet what was coming. I remember a couple weeks into living in this house, which we so adored, the character of it, the location of it, the yard was glorious. It was so fun. We walked to our favorite little health food store, and we were getting some groceries or whatever. And I just remember it was the winter. I was wearing my coat, and it was like late November. It was pretty cold. And I remember like pushing the chariot in the store and buying whatever I was buying and smelling myself. And you know how we all have like our own scent and we can't typically smell, but people are like, oh, you smell so good. Or your house smells like this. And you're like, thanks, I don't know what that smells like. I smelt the smell of our house and I was like, that's not my smell. And if there's one thing that I've learned about air quality and any sort of toxin in the air affecting the quality is that clean air does not have a smell. So if your air smells like something, there is something there, be it fragrances, which are detrimental to your endocrine system, or something more naturally occurring like mold. And I was just like, oh, I do not like the way I smell. This is not my smell. And I remember bringing these concerns to Jared, and he like half believing me. He has a terrible sense of smell. I have a super sense of smell, heightened. And he also, like, he is very on the same page with me on everything health related, but it's not like his first passion. It's like once I describe something to him and he understands, he's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. But he was not connecting dots as much as I do, because I do that for a living. And so I'm always looking around connecting dots when it comes to health and our surroundings and toxins and all that. Over the course of a couple of months, I expressed so much anxiety, and I tried to do stuff with that anxiety, both talk to him and express it, but also try and change our house. Like, we just spent all of our money trying to fix this house. There was cat pee everywhere. We had like our buddy who cleans the HVAC system for us, who's like very health aware. We had him in with like his, whatever you call it, black light thing, where you turn the lights off and you can see, and there were stains of cat pee. So we're like, well, maybe that's where the smell's coming from. So we washed as good as we could, and then we really can't get that out of cement because it seeps in. So we like painted over it multiple layers. We bought a really great air purifier. We used enzyme cleaners and mold killing things and essential oils and all of the things. We had the remediation company back in several times to try and do different things to help the odor. And honestly, it got to the point where I just felt crazy because everyone that was coming in to try and help was like, I can't find a problem. That was a bummer. And it gave me a lot of empathy for people that I work with who are going to doctors for their body. I'm going to doctors for my home who are almost being maybe sometimes intentionally gaslit, but also sometimes being unintentionally completely misunderstood and not heard. And that was really tough on me because I began to feel like I was crazy. Health-wise, it was difficult to connect the dots at this point because I was early into my pregnancy. I was nauseous, I was exhausted, and that's what I just expected pregnancy to be like. I started getting nosebleeds. I never had nosebleeds in my life, even in prior pregnancies, but I was like, well, maybe it's just this pregnancy kind of thing. Headaches, skin stuff. Our little kiddo, 2 years old, stopped napping pretty much a couple of weeks, and like, I think it was about a month when we moved into that house that he just quit napping altogether at 2 years old. We were like trying all of the things to get him to keep napping and nothing worked. And we were like, I guess he's just done napping. He is the size of many 4-year-olds we know. So perhaps his body's just done. But in hindsight, I now realize that was mold related. He also at night would cough and cough and cough, and he had a cold every 3 weeks, I would say, in that house. His eczema flared up. Again, it's winter. You're a toddler. So I'm like, as much as I don't really buy into the whole kids are just always sick thing, it was easy for me to kind of blame it on that and be like, yeah, well, I guess we've been stressed and moving, and I haven't been cooking as well or as good at giving him supplements or hydrating or whatever. Toddlers get sick. Again, in hindsight, I now realize that was all mold related. Jared had migraines. Like pretty much every week he had a migraine, and that was something that he never experienced before. His asthma, he needed to take his puffer more often, which, I mean, I try not to I don't know what it's like to live with that. So I'm like, I'm not going to judge you for taking it. But I did notice, I was like, you're taking it a lot more. It wasn't until a few months in, so 4 months into living there, that all of the dots connected for me. And I felt like I had the evidence that I needed to prove the case that was so mystically brewing in my mind. What happened was we installed like a UV light thing into the furnace to try and like purify that. We changed the filters when we bought the house, but we were trying to change the filter again to see. And I think we accidentally got the wrong size filter and we didn't realize. And so we changed the filter out. So for about a week, there was the wrong size filter in our HVAC system, which means that it wasn't filtering efficiently or well, possibly at all. And so whatever was in the HVAC and whatever was in the house in the basement was being circulated upstairs and spewed out into the air without filtration, which was terrible, but it was a blessing in disguise because it exposed what was actually going on. In that week, I kid you not, we hadn't bought a bed yet. We were still trying to fix the air quality in the basement before we moved into our basement bedroom. So we were all just sleeping together on the mattress of our king size mattress on the 1-bedroom upstairs floor. And I cleaned a lot in that house. I feel like I vacuumed twice a day, sometimes 3 times, morning, noon, and night. I mopped often. I cleaned with mold killing stuff, enzyme cleaner every single day. And it was constant dust, constant dirt. And like I would pull out the mattress from the baseboards and wipe the baseboards every few days. I would pull up the mattress and vacuum under it. I wash the sheets every week. I wash the comforter every couple weeks. I was like on it. And within that week where we had the wrong size filter, mold started growing on our comforter, which I noticed. I noticed it one day and I didn't put 2 and 2 together, but I had been for 2 straight weeks every night, like out of this world itchy. I've never experienced itchiness like that before, except maybe like head lice when I was a kid or something like that. But it was like, it was only, not only at night, it was largely at night. It was really, really bad at night. And it went on for a long time until I could fall asleep. I just felt itchy head to toe and I could not stop itching to the point where I was like, I'm going crazy. Like I would be like, have to like get out of bed and be like, bleh, you know? That was gross. And then when I saw that, I was like, maybe it's just dirt. And I think part of it was like ignorance is bliss. I don't really want to go shine a light on that. But then the next day I did, and I took out my phone flashlight and I put it, and I was like, oh my Lanta, that is literally mold growing. And from the first day to the second day, it had grown out more. And so that was disturbing. And I think that was enough evidence for Jared to be like, oh, okay, we have a problem. My wife is not crazy. Not that Jared ever thought I was crazy, but I think it's hard to understand what someone else is going through. So I would just be complaining about being itchy. And I think he's like, is this placebo because you're so freaked out about mold because of all the things you're learning, or what? We've dealt with the mold. There isn't mold according to everyone that came into the house. But there clearly was, probably in the HVAC and possibly even behind some walls in the basement, possibly under the flooring. We didn't rip everything out, so we don't know. There was no active leaks or moisture, but as we'll learn in the next 3 episodes as well, you do not need wet, actively growing, leaking source of mold to have health issues from mold, because mold can dry out, but the spores are still there and they can also still excrete mycotoxins. So whether it was just in the HVAC system and dry, or whether there was some sort of moisture somewhere under the floors that we didn't know about, or possibly in the attic, there was something going on. That was enough evidence for us to be like, this is crazy. We tossed that comforter, washed our sheets every single night in EC3 laundry, and just slept with a blanket, all 3 of us, for I think 4 more nights, and I just couldn't do it anymore. Everything was starting to click. And once I realized, it was like, oh man, I am literally a walking example of what it looks like to have your health affected by mold. I had rashes all over my legs, nosebleeds pretty much every day, like sneezing, coughing, headaches. Again, is it pregnancy? Is it not? But what I was just so convinced. I'm like, no, this is 100% affecting us. And so we left our house. We packed like minimal things. I washed a small amount of clothing in EC3, put it in a new grocery bag, and put it in the car, packed what we need for toddler sleep stuff, our bathing suits, and we tried to call insurance and see if they would cover us leaving and like staying in a hotel. But since there was no event that occurred throughout our time living there, there's nothing they can really do. We went to my husband's workplace, which I believe is also very moldy, and mostly just cried and tried to problem solve. And it was like supper time at this point, and we're like, where are we gonna go? Like I said to Jared, I'm like, I can't sleep there one more night. And he's like, yeah, I agree. I don't think we should be there. And some friends of ours offered to pay for a hotel room, which was super, super generous and kind. And we were so grateful. Mind you, as you know, many hotels can be moldy, and I was quite nervous. So we ended up going with like a nicer, newer hotel, which was more expensive. So we only stayed 2 nights, but I was like, I don't care. We just need somewhere to land where we can breathe. We had no money anymore. Like the whole selling our house to get out of debt thing did not work because of the amount. Honestly, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars went into trying to fix the house. And yeah, it did technically take care of the problem on paper. But as again, we'll learn in the next few episodes, some people are more sensitive to mold. I am convinced that both me and my husband, and then very likely our child and possibly future children, have some of the genetic predispositions that make it really difficult for your body to detoxify mold. So honestly, night 1, I was like very aware of spores and mycotoxins and like, everyone take your shoes off, take your clothes off at the door. We're going to open this fresh bag of clean, like sanitized clothes, and we're going to change into that, and we're going to toss that other stuff and clean it later. Like shoes off, like don't touch the beds. If you know, I was very like hyper aware. And I mean, our symptoms didn't go away immediately. And then in a hotel, even though it was like the air quality was good, it was like, okay, well, what are the sheets washed in and blah, blah, blah. I maybe saw a little bit of itchiness. But by the second night, I was like, oh, I feel a million times better. I didn't have a headache. I didn't have a nosebleed. I didn't have a rash. Again, slightly itchy still. But that was really interesting. And we were like, okay, I think this is 100% related. Our kiddo slept really, really well, which had not happened in months. And all in all, we were like, yep, this is the right decision. We went back to the house to grab stuff, and it was like coming back in was almost this like aha moment of like, oh my gosh, this place reeks. You just walk in and you feel gross. Not everyone might feel that, but we have the honor of being sensitive to it. And so what next? We then called around, asked around, trying to find Airbnbs. The problem is we were still paying our mortgage. We didn't have any savings left. We used everything to throw at this house and try and fix. We had now debt. So we didn't have any sort of credit to utilize, nor would that be wise. And so we just asked around, and someone from our church who had gone through a very, maybe not similar experience, but a similar story when it came to mold affecting her health and losing a home, had gone through this, and they own a trailer company and are very mold aware. And so they're like, we have a mold-free trailer parked in our driveway. You're welcome to use it. I know it's not ideal. It was the winter, so there's no water hookups. It was quite cold. The fridge didn't work. But you're welcome to it. And we didn't have any other option, so we went there. And little did we know we would be living there for 4 months. February to March, March to April, April to May, May to June, and moved to our new house the end of June. So we finished off the winter there. It was really mentally challenging. And then nearing the end of it, it was very physically challenging, being in my 3rd trimester, trying to parent a toddler in 100 square feet. As the weather got nicer, obviously we spent more time outside, but you know, some mornings you just want a slow morning, and then you're like, oh, I have not moved from this 50 square foot radius in 2 hours. You know, it really like cramped things and made parenting difficult as well. Discipline wise is difficult. How do you do a timeout when there's a sliding door that can't lock? Things like that. And co-slept with my toddler, which I'm not against at all. I loved it, but it presented a lot of challenges post-sleep training and kind of growing out of co-sleeping, and really regressed in that area and made it just really emotionally challenging and physically exhausting because none of us really slept well for 4 months. But yeah, then we had to sell our house. So there was a lot of back and forth in the first month of being in the trailer, of trying to get the house ready. We just like tossed a bunch of stuff. We donated a lot to the thrift store because I'm fully aware that a lot of people don't care about mold and lots of things in the thrift store are moldy. I think this whole situation really changed my style, I guess, because I used to be like really into like the boho natural look, wicker baskets kind of thing, wood, everything. And now I'm like, okay, plastic laundry bins, plastic totes, plastic wipeable, sanitizable storage containers, things like that you don't think about until you go through this and you're like, oh, actually, those are cesspools for mold, especially if you're coming from a moldy environment. And so don't buy wicker baskets at the thrift store. That is something that I have learned. And furniture as well. Like, it's tough because you want to weigh all of the things in health, like caring for the planet and the fact that we have so much stuff out there, and thrifting is a really good way to like minimize that. But then at the same time, it's like whatever you're buying at the thrift store, especially furniture, it's not like clothes that you can like deep wash very easily. You are bringing in whatever microbiome of that home into your home. And so you have to be careful with that. For our new house, I bought like all leather furniture, all metal bed frames, because I'm just like, I, for my sanity, I need to be able to wipe and clean things now, knowing what I know more often. And if that means that I have less of a natural aesthetic and more of like, I don't know, an industrial, or like I'm leaning more MCM, mid-century modern now, then that's a-okay, because to me, health is the top value, even though I kind of like the look of like wood. So yeah, that's kind of like the gist of the chronological happenings. And I think that within that, there was a lot of stuff. Like no one prepares you for losing your belongings. So yeah, trying to hold both and be equally grateful that this beautiful family essentially hosted us on their driveway for 4 months and very much like brought us into their life as much as they could. But also like grieving the loss of what home is. And I think I didn't realize like there's so much around like our house now. We compromised so much of what we thought mattered in a home because we realized it doesn't. It doesn't matter what color the cabinets are anymore to me. Doesn't really matter the location in the city. You know, there's like, obviously there's preferences, and if I can pick and choose, that's great. But buying a house was crazy. The market was insane. It's like every kind of dream house that we felt really excited about went within a day. And people, the one house, someone came in with $25,000 over asking price cash. We cannot do that. So it was like very limiting, and all these houses that were popping up, 5 offers day one. And we, you know, if they don't choose you, then they don't choose you. And we weren't in a financial position to be like asking or putting in offers above asking price. And so to kind of almost like settle for a house was actually like a really beautiful thing, and made me super aware of how discontented I have lived my life, especially my adult life. Just like, and it's not even like a lack of gratitude. It's just this idea of like, it could always be better and there could always be more. And that consumerism mindset will always haunt our surroundings in this day and age. But I think that is one beautiful thing that's come from it, despite the process being incredibly painful. I would also say lonely. It's been very lonely. Not a lot of people understand what this experience is like. I mean, similar to death or birth, like any big and hard life change, people are there for you for a couple weeks, and they bring you meals and they check in on you. And then you're kind of left with the reality of your new life. And that's kind of how it felt for us in the trailer. And not, you know, no hard feelings against anyone. It's like, yeah, everyone has to live their life, but it was lonely and a hard thing to navigate. I would say it's weird being homeless. Like, you don't think of the amount of times like you go to emergency and is this still your current address on your license? And you're just like, yeah, it is. Not going to get into my life story right now. Or buying things for our new home, and that transition is like, we don't have an address to send things to. So like sending Amazon packages to my office, and bed frames to different people's houses and picking them up, and just the chaos of like not having a home base, not having somewhere that feels like your haven. And safety is a really big value of mine, but I think now more than ever, it will be amplified for me that home is going to be a haven of safety and health. And I'm really excited to build that with my family after this, honestly, really just terrible experience. Finally, I think what it did to me faith-wise was interesting. I had a bit of a faith crisis, and I mean, God has done too much in my lifetime that I've witnessed to doubt that God exists for me. But it was more like the application of my faith. Like, what does following Jesus look like, and what does that mean? And a lot of it for me came down to the idea of discernment and that kind of being untangled throughout this situation, because I think I had this deep core belief that logically I would know is not correct, but emotionally was still how I was operating around, like, if I choose the thing that I feel and think that God is asking me to do, then I will be blessed abundantly and everything shall go well for me. But that, honestly, I just don't think that's the case. It was very much a prayerful decision to sell our first home and buy this house. And how are we supposed to know? My instinct when all this hit the fan was like, oh, I must have heard God wrong, and beating myself up and questioning me and Jared's discernment together. But at the end of the day, what if sometimes life just sucks and God is still good and God's not surprised and God's above it, and God also is not using a really hard situation to punish our misstep? I do think that we can be ignorant to God and walk the other way, of course. But that's not what this is, and that's not what a lot of our lives are as believers. It's like we do our best with what we know. Discernment is always scary. Faith is scary because the reality is we actually don't know. It's like that's the whole point of faith, is like there actually isn't. It isn't about completely understanding everything. You have to actually just believe at some point, and it does rock your world when your belief does not match your circumstance. And I think I'm excited to have this revelation in my tool belt. Because I think that I'm only going to start beginning to see how much that has affected my life and my views of God and my views of myself, and the shame that I've carried for things going poorly in my life. They're not my fault. Some of them are. But a lot of things are just because life sucks. The world is broken. Mold is part of the fall. At least in this context, mold's also just a natural part of the environment. But I do think that was a really beautiful lesson of all of this. And I'm confident in saying that, but it also took me a while to be able to say that, because I also acknowledge that, like, not everything needs to have a silver lining or a lesson either. And there was a lot of weeks in this whole ordeal that I was just like, I can't find the lesson and I don't care. This just freaking sucks. So yeah, that's kind of our story in a nutshell. And it brings me to the beginning of this series where I'm just really excited to share the next 3 conversations that I got to have with incredible people that I trust so much with this information, because they are some of the best. And I really hope that in the Andrew Melrose episode, he says it really beautifully, but don't attach my horror story, in this case, to yours. Just because you have bloody noses doesn't mean that you're living my story, right? There might be some overlap, as Andrew says in the episode you'll hear next. However, I hope that the story inspires you and empowers you and encourages you to question. As always, in the Roots and Fruits realm here in this community, I'm really just trying to bring awareness to the fact that there's unseen things beneath the things that we see. And this is no different. And so I really just hope and pray that this can be a blessing and to bring you into greater measures of health and not fear. That's a really big thing too that I'm still working through, is like, it's hard not to be just terrified of mold now after all this. And after losing thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of stuff, you're like, I have a bit of mold anxiety. And I hope that does not get passed on to listeners, but just the wisdom around it. And I hope that the next few episodes too can bring some peace and clarity to those things as well. So yeah, that is all. That is it. And thank you so much for taking the time to hear our unfiltered story. Bless you, and we'll catch you next time. Coming up next on the Roots and Fruits podcast mold mini series.
If you only spent under an hour inspecting the house, I can tell you right there, you're not even getting a confident, hey, your house is good. That's not even a confident saying what that person said. So I think for a 2,000 square foot house, somewhat standard size, then your inspection should be no less than 3 hours, probably closer to 6. It just depends on how in depth you're going to go, what you're finding, but taking the time and really being thorough and detailed is knowing what to look and how to look, and all that is really, that's the key and going to give us the most data.